The council chamber had never been this quiet. The most powerful leaders in the galaxy sat motionless, their eyes filled with something unfamiliar: fear. Drax, the ever-defiant warrior, clenched his fists. "Beg, you expect the greatest civilizations of the galaxy to bow before them, to grovel like lesser species." His voice was filled with rage, but even he could not hide the tremor in his words. Velistar's cold gaze did not waver. If it means survival, then yes. The room tensed as the weight of those words settled over them. The Galactic Council had never pleaded for peace. They had dictated it. They had crushed empires, reshaped civilizations, and bent the wills of species that resisted their rule. But now, for the first time, they were the ones who had no control. Thailand looked down at the reports again, his mandibles twitching in nervous calculation. "We assumed humanity would act like every other empire before them, that they would push for dominance, that they would seek expansion." He shook his head. "We were wrong." A sharp hiss echoed through the room as the Kiteri diplomat leaned forward. "Then why do they fight?" Velistar's voice was like a blade cutting through the silence. "Because when they fight, they are not fighting for power. They are not fighting for conquest." His gaze hardened. "They fight because they refuse to be ruled." A cold realization settled in the chamber. Humanity had never sought to control the galaxy because they had no need for it. They already had everything they wanted. Their homeworld was rich, their colonies strong, their technology advancing at a terrifying pace. They were fighting simply because someone tried to take their freedom, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Drax exhaled sharply, his massive frame tensing as he read the latest intelligence report. His voice was quiet, almost hollow. "Their fleets have not moved." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Kylan hesitated. "What?" Drax turned the screen toward the council. The human warships remained in their own territory. No signs of aggression. No attempts to attack. No movements toward invasion. The Galactic Council had expected war. They had braced for a battle unlike anything the galaxy had seen. But the humans had not retaliated. They had rejected every peace deal, laughed at every threat, and ignored every attempt at negotiation. And yet, they had not struck back. The implications were terrifying. The Kiteri diplomat's voice was shaky. "Then, they are waiting." Velistar nodded slowly. "They are waiting. Waiting for us to make the next move. Waiting for us to prove whether we are foolish enough to continue this game. Waiting, because they already knew the outcome." Drax ran a clawed hand down his face, realization settling in. This was never a war. Silen's voice was barely above a whisper. No, it was a warning. The council looked around the room, eyes filled with dread. Humanity had already won, not through force, not through battle, but by making the entire galaxy realize a single horrifying truth. They did not need to fight us, because we were never a threat to them in the first place. He glanced around the room, meeting the frightened eyes of every council member. Are we the rulers, or are we just children standing in the shadow of giants? A thick silence fell over the chamber. No one had an answer. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council realized the truth. They were not dealing with an equal. They were dealing with something far, far greater. The silence in the council chamber grew heavier, suffocating even the most hardened diplomats. The truth that had been spoken, the realization that humanity was not just another species, but something beyond comprehension, hung over them like a storm. Drax, ever the warrior, refused to accept it. His scales shimmered under the dim light as he stood. We have survived for thousands of years. We have seen countless civilizations rise and fall. We are the ones who decide the fate of this galaxy. Velistar turned his cold gaze toward him. Then tell me, Drax, what happens when the gods refuse to kneel? Drax bared his fangs but said nothing. He had no answer. The council's grand chamber, usually a place of power, arrogance, and certainty, felt disturbingly small. The galaxy's greatest minds had gathered here for millennia, dictating the fate of lesser species. Now they sat in fearful silence, staring at reports of a species that did not conquer, but could if it wanted to. And that terrified them. Cylon, still gripping the data tablet, hesitated before speaking. We've always believed that war is inevitable, that when a species grows strong enough, it will seek to dominate. He looked up, his large eyes filled with unease. But humanity doesn't seek control. They don't expand like us. Their history is filled with wars, but they never truly conquered the way our empires have. Another council member, a six-eyed Kitari diplomat, hissed, "If they do not seek to rule, then why do they fight so ruthlessly?" Velisthar's voice was low and grave. "Because when they fight, it is personal." The words sent chills down their spines. The reports were clear. Humanity did not start wars for power, but when they were wronged, they fought as if the universe itself had betrayed them. And when they fought, they did not stop until their enemies were broken beyond repair. The Council knew war. They had waged it for centuries, but not like this. Not with the fury of a species that refused to lose. Drax's claws scratched against the table as he read a particular report. His voice was unsteady. The Battle of Andros IV. The Garthak Empire had superior numbers, superior firepower. They were winning. He swallowed. Then the humans lost a single colony ship. Just one. A pause. Kylan finished for him, his voice barely above a whisper. And in response, the humans wiped out every Garthak military installation within 6 light years. A horrified silence followed. It was the same pattern in every conflict. Humanity did not seek war, but when war found them, they ended it completely. Drax shook his head, his confidence cracking. "We've pushed empires into submission before. We've forced species to kneel." He looked around the chamber. Why wouldn't it work on them? Velisthar's expression was grim. Because every empire we've defeated had something to lose. They feared destruction. They feared collapse. His voice dropped to a whisper. But humanity does not fear war. They embrace it. The weight of those words sent a ripple of panic through the council. The thought was too monstrous to comprehend. A species that did not see war as a last resort, but as a natural state of existence. Drax slammed his fists on the table. Then what do? We cannot fight them. We cannot force them to accept peace. If we do nothing, we sit on the edge of a blade. Velisthar's gaze darkened. Then perhaps the only option left is to beg. The words shook the chamber. The Galactic Council, rulers of the stars, had never begged for anything. And yet, for the first time in history, they considered it. The screen flickered, and suddenly, thousands of classified reports appeared. Records of failed alien invasions against Earth, secret intelligence on human military strategies, battle footage showing entire enemy fleets wiped out in minutes. The final report was the most chilling of all. It showed a list of every civilization that had ever tried to conquer humanity. Every single one of them was either extinct or under human control. Carter leaned back in his chair. "You see, we've been through this before. Many times. Every time some great alien empire shows up demanding surrender or peace on their terms, it always ends the same way." He smiled. "With them begging us to stop." The council chamber exploded in chaos. Diplomats shouted in panic. Military advisors whispered hurriedly to their superiors. Some demanded immediate action. Others insisted on retreat. Velisthar felt a cold chill run down his spine. The humans were not refusing peace because they wanted war. They were refusing peace because they already knew how this would end. Ambassador Carter stood up and stretched. "Well, this has been fun. But I think we're done here." He turned off his transmission, and his image vanished from the screen. The Supreme Speaker looked at the terrified faces of the council members around him. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Union, The council chamber remained in stunned silence long after the human ambassador's image vanished from the screen. The cold truth settled in, heavier than the crushing gravity of a neutron star. The humans weren't interested in peace because they didn't need it. Velstar, the supreme speaker, clenched his jaw. His sharp claws dug into the armrest of his chair as he glanced at the other council members. Fear was painted across their faces. Some whispered amongst themselves, trying to process the implications of what they had just seen. Others sat frozen, unable to even form words. General Drax, the Krith Dominion's military leader, slammed his massive fist onto the table, sending a deep echo through the chamber. This is a trick, a bluff. No species can be that powerful. We have ruled this galaxy for thousands of years. How could we have missed a threat like this? Cylon, the blue-skinned diplomat from the Olaris Commonwealth, rubbed his temples, his long fingers shaking. Maybe we never truly looked at them. His voice was barely a whisper. We thought they were just another species to bring under our control, but what if they were never meant to be ruled? The Council's data system still displayed the chilling report that Ambassador Carter had sent them. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity's wars, their victories, their terrifying ability to turn enemies into dust. Even the strongest empires had crumbled before them. The reports were filled with nightmare scenarios. A fleet of 50 warships from the Garthak Empire vanished in human space without a single distress signal. The Seraphi Dominion sent an invasion force of 2 million soldiers to Earth's colony world, expecting an easy victory. They were never heard from again. The mighty Xrathis Armada, the most feared military force in the Western Quadrant, fought humans for exactly 1 week before their leader personally surrendered. And yet, despite all this, humanity had never expanded aggressively. They did not conquer for the sake of ruling. They simply defended themselves, and they did it so efficiently that no one dared challenge them twice. Drax's breathing grew heavier. His reptilian eyes darted across the reports, his claws gripping the table. If this is all true, if humans are truly as strong as they seem, then why do they not rule the galaxy already? Velisthar exhaled sharply. Because they don't want to. The room fell silent. The thought sent a fresh wave of dread through the council. Every species that had risen to power in galactic history had been hungry for control. Empires expanded because of greed, ambition, or the need for dominance. But not humanity. They had the strength to take anything they wanted, yet they remained within their borders. They only fought when provoked. And when they did fight, they ended wars with brutal efficiency. Drax's tail lashed behind him. Then we should strike now, before they become an even bigger threat. We still have the numbers. We still have control over trade routes. If we move quickly, we can isolate them. Phylan cut him off, his voice filled with panic. You want to attack them, after seeing what they're capable of. Drax growled. It's better than waiting for them to turn against us. Velisthar slammed his fist onto the table, silencing the argument. Enough. We will not make reckless decisions. He turned toward the data screen, reading the reports once more. His voice became grim. We have spent centuries thinking of ourselves as the rulers of this galaxy. But now we must ask ourselves an uncomfortable question. The chamber felt colder now, as if the weight of their realization had drained the very warmth from the air. The Galactic Council had spent centuries ruling with absolute authority. Yet in the face of humanity, their threats, their bargains, their entire existence meant nothing. Drax's claws scraped against the table. His rage was barely contained. So we do nothing. We simply accept that they are above us. Cylon's mandibles clicked as he exhaled slowly. Do you not understand, Drax? We never had a choice. The Kitari diplomat's tail coiled tightly, a sign of deep fear. The humans never attacked us. They never demanded anything from us. They simply refused to obey. And that, more than anything, shattered our illusion of power. Because for the first time in history, the Council had encountered a species that could not be threatened, bribed, or controlled. Humanity had power, yet they did not seek to rule. Humanity had technology, yet they did not boast. Humanity had strength, yet they did not fear war. The entire foundation of the Council's authority was based on control. Control through diplomacy, through force, through fear. But how do you control a species that refuses to play the game? Velisthar finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. We spent years trying to break them, to make them see reason. And now we realize we are the ones who never understood reality. Drax's breathing was heavy. Then what happens now? A long pause. Cylon's voice was grim. Now, we step aside. The words felt like a death sentence. The Council had ruled for millennia, yet today, without a single battle, they had lost. Not to war, not to politics, but to the unstoppable will of humanity. And as the chamber doors sealed shut, the galaxy knew. The era of the Council was over. The era of humanity had begun. The Galactic Council chamber was filled with tension. Dozens of alien diplomats sat in their floating chairs, their holographic displays flashing reports of the latest crisis. The room was silent except for the occasional whispers and the low hum of the central data core. At the center of the chamber, Supreme Speaker Velisthar, a tall reptilian being with dark green scales, stared at the giant screen in front of him. His long fingers tapped against the desk as he read the most disturbing line in the report. Humanity refuses all peace offers. They are laughing at us. The Council had dealt with many aggressive species before, but this was different. Humanity was not like the others. Every race that had been offered a peace deal in the past had either accepted it out of fear or negotiated for better terms. But the humans, they acted like this was some kind of joke. Velisthar turned toward his fellow council members. We must take action now. The humans are reckless, arrogant, and dangerous. If we do not force them to accept our peace treaty, they may become a threat to the balance of the galaxy. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Perhaps we are overreacting. A blue-skinned diplomat named Cylon suggested, his voice calm but uncertain. Maybe this is just part of their culture. Some species have strange ways of communicating. Maybe they do not understand the seriousness of our offer. A large, armored alien, General Drax of the Krith Dominion, growled in frustration. They understand perfectly. They are mocking us. No species has ever rejected a Galactic Council peace offer this way. Not only have they refused our terms, but they also sent back a message saying. Drax pulled up the translation on the screen. The words were simple, direct, and filled with disrespect. That's cute. The room went dead silent. The phrase had been analyzed multiple times. There was no mistake. The humans were laughing at the Council's authority. Velisthar clenched his jaw. This is unacceptable. We gave them every opportunity to join the Galactic Union peacefully. We offered them technology, resources, even protection from hostile species, and they respond like this. The tension grew thicker. A few diplomats exchanged worried glances. The humans were new to the galactic stage, but they had already developed faster than light travel without any outside help. They had expanded their influence rapidly, securing trade routes, colonizing distant planets, and establishing powerful alliances with independent systems. And worst of all, they had never lost a war. Every attempt by smaller empires to challenge them had ended in complete disaster. Armadas had vanished without a trace. Planets had fallen in days. Entire governments had collapsed overnight. And yet, even after all of this, no one truly knew how powerful humanity really was. The Galactic Council had assumed that humanity would eventually fall in line, just like every other species had before them. But now, that assumption was crumbling. Drax slammed his fist on the table. I say we force them to sign the treaty, cut off their trade routes, blockade their colonies, apply pressure until they beg for peace. Cylon shook his head. That would be a mistake. If we push them too hard, they may retaliate. The Supreme Speaker exhaled slowly. He turned to the holographic screen and opened a secure communication line. A moment later, the human ambassador appeared. Ambassador Carter. A middle-aged man with a calm expression, short brown hair, and sharp eyes that held no fear. He was sitting in a simple chair, sipping a cup of coffee as if this entire meeting was just a minor inconvenience. Velisthar cleared his throat. Ambassador Carter, do you understand the seriousness of this situation? The Galactic Council has offered your species a generous peace treaty, yet you refuse. Again and again. I must ask you directly. Why? Carter took another slow sip of his coffee before answering. Oh, we understand just fine. He set his cup down and leaned forward slightly. The problem isn't that we don't understand. The problem is that we're not interested. Drax growled. This is not a negotiation, human. Either you accept the treaty, or we will be forced to take action. Carter chuckled. Not a nervous chuckle, not an unsure one. A confident, amused laugh. You're welcome to try, he said, his voice filled with absolute certainty. The chamber fell into stunned silence. No fear, no hesitation, no weakness. It was as if the entire Galactic Council was nothing more than a minor annoyance to this one human. Velisthar narrowed his eyes. You dare to mock us? Carter smirked. No, we're taking you very seriously. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small datapad. With a few taps, he transmitted something to the Council's system. Here, a little light reading for you. The Council chamber remained silent, the weight of realization pressing down like an unseen force. The greatest empires of the galaxy had gathered, prepared for war, yet the enemy, the humans, did not even consider them a real threat. Drax's claws tapped against the table, his fury barely contained. This is a trick, a bluff. They want us to hesitate, to fear them. Velisthar shook his head. Do they, or are we simply realizing the truth? A cold shiver ran through the room. Power had always belonged to those who wielded the biggest fleets, the strongest armies. For centuries, the Council had dictated galactic politics with that very belief. Empires had been destroyed, entire species erased, all in the name of maintaining that fragile balance of control. Yet now, humanity stood outside that balance. They didn't fight for conquest. They didn't fear war. And worst of all, they didn't even care about the Council's power. Katilan finally spoke, his voice filled with quiet dread. We assumed they would fight like us, that they would build war machines in secret, strike at our weak points, break us with force. He turned the holoscreen toward the others. A map of the galaxy flickered into view, with each species' influence marked in glowing blue and red. Humanity's territory was outlined in white. It had not grown. It had not moved. They have not expanded. Cylon continued. They have not invaded. They have not even tried to exert control over their neighbors. For decades, we assumed they were gathering their strength, waiting for the right moment to strike. He looked up, mandibles twitching. But what if they simply never cared? The thought was horrifying. For centuries, the Council had prepared for war against any rising species. They had crushed civilizations that became too powerful. They had even preemptively wiped out species who showed signs of military ambition. But the humans, they were beyond ambition. They had power but didn't use it. They had technology but didn't flaunt it. They had military strength but didn't deploy it recklessly. And now, as the Council panicked and scrambled for an answer, humanity simply sat back and watched. A deep growl rumbled from Drax's throat. If they are so powerful, why haven't they wiped us out? If they don't fear us, why let us exist? The Kiteri diplomat answered in a whisper. Because to them, we are not enemies. We are nothing. Silence. It was the most humiliating truth they had ever faced. The Galactic Council, rulers of countless worlds, conquerors of entire star systems, were insignificant to humanity. and that made humanity unstoppable. The silence in the council chamber was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. The realization had sunk in too deep. For centuries, the council had ruled through fear. Empires rose and fell at their command. Yet now, standing at the edge of what should have been the greatest war in history, they faced an enemy that simply didn't care. Humanity had rejected every peace offer. They had ignored every threat. They had stood firm, not because they wanted to conquer, but because they refused to kneel. And the worst part, they never needed to fight. Cylon's mandibles twitched. They do not attack us, yet we fear them. The Kiteri diplomat's tail flicked nervously, because we know if they did attack, we would lose. Velisthar exhaled sharply, glancing at the latest intelligence report. Human warships had not moved. No fleets were mobilizing. No armies were advancing. They were waiting for the council to realize the truth. Drax clenched his fists. This is unacceptable. We cannot allow them to hold this much power over us. We must act. Cylon narrowed his eyes. And what would you have us do? Declare war. The chamber tensed. Drax had no answer. Because a war against humanity would be suicide. Every strategy, every prediction pointed to the same outcome. Humanity would not start the war, but they would end it. The Kiteri diplomat's voice was barely above a whisper. Then what do we do? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Velisthar tapped the table lightly. We accept the truth. Drax scowled. And what truth is that? Velisthar's gaze was cold. That we were never in control. That we never truly had power. That the balance of the galaxy shifted the moment humanity arrived. And for the first time in history, the council knew what it felt like to be powerless.